My dad said I'm a failure. Then his CEO looked at me and said something that made the whole room go silent. My father never raised his voice when he insulted me. He didn't need to. His tone was always flat, practiced, efficient, as though pointing out my shortcomings was just part of his daily checklist. Every conversation with him, whether we were at home, in the car, or even at a restaurant, found a way to circle back to the same message. I wasn't enough. You'll never build anything real, he'd say while tightening his tie in the hallway mirror, his reflection sneering like it had something better to do. Your siblings knew what they wanted. You? Still wasting time on your little computer games. Those weren't games, but there was no point explaining. By the time the annual gala came around, I already knew I was only invited to serve a purpose. Not as a guest. Certainly not as a son to be proud of. No, I was a symbol, a cautionary tale wrapped in a pressed shirt and silence. I knew how it would go. He'd shake hands with men who ran things, nod at women who ran more, and steer me through conversations like a child being shown off at a science fair. Except I wasn't the ribbon-winning project. I was the broken prototype. That evening, the ballroom at the company headquarters was a cathedral of suits and high ceilings. Crystal light fixtures hung overhead like polished eyes, watching everything. Waiters moved between clusters of conversation, serving hors d'oeuvres I didn't recognize, and every word spoken around me felt like a script I hadn't rehearsed for. My father's grip on my shoulder was light, but it controlled every step I took. Every time he introduced me, it came with a smirk. This is my youngest. He's figuring things out. One chuckled. Another gave a sympathetic nod. Someone even patted my back like they were at a funeral. I stayed quiet, eyes forward, hands in my pockets, lips pressed together. I didn't owe them anything. Not an explanation, not a smile, not a performance. If I had $1 for every time someone asked what I did for a living, I could have bought my own table at the gala. But I just said, I work in tech, and left it there. Because I design AI frameworks always led to confused nods or polite interest that faded before dessert. Then it happened. Right when my father was finishing another story about how my brother landed a senior role at some firm with 4 syllables in its name, someone tapped his shoulder from behind. He turned mid-sentence and everything about his posture shifted. The man standing there didn't need an introduction. Everyone knew who he was. The CEO. Clean lines on his suit, calm in his eyes, a face carved by boardroom victories. My father straightened instantly, like a schoolboy caught talking in class. The CEO's eyes moved past him and locked onto me. Not a passing glance, a direct look, sharp and measured, like he knew exactly who I was. He didn't smile immediately. First, he studied me. His mouth twitched slightly, then curved. So, this is the one who built that AI solution we've been trying to license, he said. The room didn't just go silent. It stalled, like a scene frozen in time. I heard someone set down their glass too hard. My father blinked. His mouth opened, then closed again. Excuse me, he said, but the CEO was already stepping around him. He extended a hand to me. We've been chasing the team behind that predictive engine, the one that restructured decision flows with only 20% of the usual data input. Brilliant work. And here you are. I took his hand without looking at my father. I didn't know you were aware of it, I said. My voice was even, maybe a little too calm. We don't just notice, the CEO replied. We study, we admire, and frankly, we'd like to partner, directly, if you're open to it. No one moved. No one said a word. My father, who had spent the last hour parading my failures, stood frozen next to a man who had just rewritten my label in one sentence. He didn't speak for the rest of the night, and I didn't sleep for the rest of the night. Not because I was overwhelmed, but because my mind couldn't stop replaying every second. The look on my father's face wasn't confusion. It was something heavier, something unfamiliar to him. His grip on control had always been tight, always exact. He spoke, people listened. He pointed, they followed. But now, in front of the most powerful man in the room, his words meant nothing. Mine had weight. My name carried value. And for once, he couldn't interrupt. spin it, or shove me into the background. The gala ended with handshakes, a few card exchanges, and me walking out 2 steps ahead of my father. He didn't say a word on the ride back. No criticism. No questions. Just silence. The kind that filled the space between us like smoke. I didn't bother trying to break it. If he wanted to say something, he would. But the damage had already been done. Not to me, to him. The next morning came fast. I had just started to make coffee when my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I let it ring. Then it buzzed again. Voicemail. Then another text, short and sharp. This is Harold Quinn. I'd like to schedule a meeting with you today. Let me know your availability. I didn't need to ask who he was. The CEO remembered my name. And he wasn't bluffing. I replied. Kept it simple. He sent a time, an address, and an assistant's number. Everything was handled with precision. I didn't have to explain anything. No back and forth. No confusion. By noon, I was in the elevator of a building most people in the city only saw from the street. Polished floors, controlled temperature, quiet as a vault. The kind of place where people walked fast and talked low. I was dressed simply. No shoot, no tie. I didn't own any, but I came prepared. I had my documents, my data, my numbers, and I had something better than confidence. I had proof. Proof of what I built. Proof of what worked. Proof that didn't need to be explained or dressed up. It spoke for itself. The assistant, clean-cut, polite, walked me into a boardroom with more glass than walls. Harold Quinn was already seated. No small talk. No icebriakers. Sit, he said. We'll get right to it. I did. He leaned forward. Tell me how it works. So I did. No buzzwords. No fluff. Just the facts. I broke down how I'd rewritten traditional behavior modeling using adaptive data clusters, how I'd used reinforcement loops to tighten prediction ranges, how I'd structured the framework so it could run on minimal resources without losing efficiency. He didn't blink. He followed every word. When I finished, he sat back. I ran a lab, he said. 15 years ago. Before all this. I know what you've done, and I know what it's worth. That was the moment it became real. This wasn't interest. This was investment. And not just in a product in me. He leaned forward again. We've been testing for systems. None of them solved the problem you did. The efficiency, the stability, the adaptability, all of it's ahead. I want to bring you in. Not as staff. Not as some consultant. I want a partnership. Full rights, shared license, long-term stake. I didn't speak. Not because I was unsure, but because he hadn't finished. He reached into a folder, pulled out a printed sheet. This is the opening offer. You'll have legal look it over. If you have representation, they can call my team. I scanned it. It wasn't just generous. It was serious. This was no testing phase. No string of interviews. No weeks of proving myself. This was real, immediate, and fully backed. Then he paused, set the pen down. I want you to understand something, he said. Your father has a reputation here. Respected, yes. But rigid. Conservative. Slow to adapt. He didn't even know your name was attached to the prototype until I told him. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. He continued. When I first saw your work, I thought it was a research team. Then I realized it was one person. You didn't just build a tool. You solved an operational problem we've been bleeding time and money on for 2 years. He stood. The meeting was done. You'll get our revisions within 2 days. Take your time. Don't let anyone rush you. Not your father, not even me. If this works out, I want you operating with full creative freedom. No boardroom politics. No red tape. He walked me to the door himself. The assistant didn't move. The office didn't make a sound. By the time I got home, I had 7 missed calls, 3 from my father. I didn't return them. Later that evening, the house phone rang. I almost let it go, but something told me to pick it up. His voice was clipped, dry, not angry, just unsteady. I heard you met with Quinn. I waited. He said you're moving forward with a deal. Again, I waited. He sighed. You should bring it to the house this weekend. Your mother wants to see you. That was the first time he didn't mention the job or the project or anything about my choices. Just my mother, as if softening the edge would make it easier. I said I'd think about it. The next day, things shifted quickly. I was pulled into 3 virtual meetings. Quinn's legal team introduced themselves. Clean, direct, efficient. No pressure. No hidden language. Everything was above board. They walked me through the revisions line by line, making sure I understood exactly what I was signing. Then came the request for a visit to the team, a small group of engineers working on systems integration. Not a formal interview, just a walkthrough. I agreed. They wanted to see how I worked, not how I talked. That was fine by me. I arrived at the integration office later that week. Nothing flashy. Just a clean workspace filled with monitors, whiteboards, and people who didn't care about my background. Only the code I wrote. A senior developer named Ellie met me at the door. Sharp, straight-talking, no nonsense. She pointed to a console. We've been hitting walls trying to implement dynamic scaling. You said your build handles that. Show me. I sat down, opened my files, and walked them through the logic. She didn't smile, didn't nod, just watched. After 20 minutes, she motioned to her screen. Tried here. I did. 10 minutes later, the model began adapting. Load dropped. Speed increased. Errors dropped to near zero. She stared at it, then leaned back. I'll be damned. That was it. No celebration. No grand applause. Just recognition. That was more than enough. The rest of the day was testing, questions, real-time tweaks. They respected output, not resumes. That was how I liked it. By the time I left, Ellie shook my hand. You work different, she said. Not corporate. Not slow. We need that. That night, I got a call. Quinn again. You passed the second test, he said. They want you. We're ready when you are. Still, I didn't sign right away. Not because I doubted him. I just needed to think. The weekend came. I drove to the house. The same one I grew up in. Same porch. Same door that squeaked at the hinge. My mother answered. Her face lit up. She hugged me like it had been years. It hadn't, but in her world, anything more than a month felt like forever. She ushered me in, asked about food, asked if I'd eaten. I nodded. She asked anyway. Then came my father. Same firm posture, same guarded tone. I heard you're making moves, he said, sitting across from me. I nodded. Nothing more. He looked at me, not angry, but unsure. I didn't know it was you, he said after a pause. The AI. The prototype. I didn't know. I didn't answer. He kept going. I said a lot of things. Maybe I pushed too hard. He never used words like, sorry. That was as close as it got. I just thought you were throwing it all away, he added. You never explained. I didn't think I had to, I said. That was the first time we spoke without raising voices, without turning it into a war. He didn't apologize. I didn't ask for one. Before I left, he handed me a folder. Inside were articles, headlines, printouts of reports, all about me, about the tech. He'd been tracking it, quietly, maybe trying to understand, maybe just trying to keep up. As I drove home, I didn't feel vindicated. I felt steady. The past wasn't erased, but it didn't define the present anymore. 3 days later, I signed the deal. No announcements, no parties, just a document. My name, their seal. 2 months passed. In that time, everything shifted. The deal with Quinn went through without complication. Contracts signed. Teams assembled. The integration moved faster than expected. They didn't question how I worked. They gave me what I needed, time, access, and space to build. I wasn't tucked into a corner office or placed under layers of managers. Quinn kept his word. I answered directly to him. No delays. No politics. My system was rebranded under their infrastructure. Licensing requests came in from sectors I hadn't even targeted: logistics, medical, even defense. I handled the customization, led the scaling, and trained 2 core teams to manage deployment without bottlenecking updates. Every milestone we hit proved what I'd known all along. The work spoke louder than the resume. Meanwhile, my name began appearing in places I never expected. Internal newsletters, investor decks, press articles. For the first time, the tech wasn't credited to a faceless team. It was mine, publicly and clearly. Interviews were requested. I turned most down. I wasn't chasing attention. I wanted results. Back home, things had quieted. My father didn't call often, but when he did, his voice was more measured. Not soft, he'd never be that, but less sharp. He asked questions, not to pry, just to understand. He didn't pretend to know what I was building. He just listened. That, in itself, was new. One Sunday afternoon, he asked me to come over. "It's important," he said. "You should see something." I drove up without hesitation. When I stepped into the house, he was already in the living room, sitting by the fireplace with a binder on the table. He opened it and pushed it toward me. "I've been collecting these," he said. Inside were printed screenshots, article clippings, and quotes pulled from press releases and executive memos. Most had my name on them. Others showed graphs, market impact, company growth reports. "I used to think results were only real if I could see them with my own eyes," he said. "I was wrong. You built something bigger than I understood. You didn't fail. I just didn't know where to look." He didn't say more. He didn't need to. I nodded once. That was enough. There was nothing else to fix. No apology required. It wasn't about rewriting the past. It was about knowing he'd stopped fighting the present. By the end of the quarter, Quinn asked me to join him for a leadership meeting. Not as a guest, as a partner. The room wasn't filled with strangers anymore. The same board members who once nodded politely at my father's remarks were now asking me questions directly. Real questions. About vision, architecture, long-term alignment. They weren't pretending to care. They genuinely wanted direction. I gave them answers clean and focused. When the meeting wrapped up, Quinn pulled me aside. "You've got room to grow here. More than just this project," he said. "I'm stepping back from active strategy next year. We'll need someone sharp, someone who understands the architecture and the execution." I didn't respond right away. He didn't expect me to. "Think about it," he said, then walked off. That night, I didn't celebrate. I sat at my desk, looked at the original design notes I'd scribbled 2 years earlier, before any of this started, when I was working in my room, unseen, unheard. I remembered every word my father had said back then. The dismissals, the mockery, the comparisons. But none of it mattered now. Not because it didn't hurt, but because it no longer defined anything. What I built came from conviction, not spite. And that mattered. Weeks later, I accepted Quinn's offer. Not because I needed a title, but because I could finally lead without compromise. I brought in my own hires. People who thought fast, challenged assumptions, and delivered without waiting for approval. We built tools with purpose, aimed at problems that weren't obvious but deeply rooted. My work wasn't flashy. It was necessary, and that kept everything grounded. My father eventually retired from his division. Quietly. No big announcement. I heard through someone at the company that he'd stepped down, citing, "Time to let younger minds lead." He didn't mention me, but he didn't have to. The last time we spoke, it was at a family dinner. Everyone was there. My siblings, their families, even relatives we hadn't seen in years. At some point, someone asked about the AI system. Before I could answer, my father cut in. "He designed the core of it on his own," he said. "What they're using now, it wouldn't exist without his work." That sentence came out clean, steady, and without hesitation. Then he went quiet. He didn't look at me. He didn't have to. The room heard him. That was all I ever needed.